to What's Hot Harlem America with G. Keith Alexander. The crossroads where culture, lifestyle, and community meet, all hosted by the legendary New York radio TV personality and proud Harlem American, G. Keith Alexander.
Thank you so very, very much, Kever. And hey, welcome to What's Hot Harlem America with G. Keith Alexander. Wherever you are, I appreciate you for joining our neighborhood as we hang out together in Harlem, America. Today, in the What's Hot Spotlight is Mr. Billy, well, you could either call him Mr. Billy Mitchell or Mr. Apollo Billy Mitchell or Mr. Apollo Mitchell. Anyway, he's here with us today, and he has started his career at the Apollo years ago. He started running errands for people like James Brown and a whole bunch of other folks that he'll talk to us about. He is the historical tour manager and tour director, and his book is called They Call Me Mr. Apollo. So Mr. Billy Mitchell, who is Mr. Apollo, hello there and welcome to What's Hot Harlem America.
How are you, my dear friend? It's so good to see you, G. Keith.
My pleasure. I've been wanting to talk to you for quite a while.
Yeah.
Finally, we were able to make it. So, Billy, how have you been holding up during this COVID?
Well, I've been fortunate. I'm home with my sugar wooger, my wife, Barbara Mitchell. We've been taking care of each other, during this whole pandemic thing. So we're eating right, we're keeping our mind right, trying to stay healthy, and I've been very busy doing things remotely from home for the Apollo Theater.
Now that's amazing because, you're you're remotely from home because you're the tour director. And I've been in the Apollo while you're giving tours. So how do you give tours from home?
Well, we created back in January, Brad San Martin, who is our digital archivist, we created this virtual tour that we're going to be rolling out to the public very, very soon. But we've been doing test runs of it for corporations and things like that. So we have a virtual tour that we're going to offer to the public very soon because they're not allowed in the theater because we're not allowed to have our public into the theater yet. So we had to pivot. And we created this virtual tour that is just outstanding. The response has been incredible. You get to see film footage, photos that people never saw before. I share my personal journey of the Apollo Theater on this virtual tour. So it's exciting. It's educational and a lot of fun, and it'll be out very, very soon.
That is great to hear because you started out early on, like maybe 1965 at the Apollo. So who's better to give a tour or a retrospective than Mr. Billy Mitchell?
Yes, sir. And that was one of the things why I created the tour. I went to management back in 1991 or 92. And I, posed that question, could I start doing tours of the theater? And they says, tours? I said, yeah, with the things that I've experienced, and being articulate, and with my theater background, I'll create this picture of the Apollo as I guide people backstage to the dressing rooms and share with them the things that I've seen and who performed here and who did what. So it worked out very bigger than we ever thought. So now we get visitors from all over the world who now visit the Apollo Theater for what we call our Apollo Historic Tour.
Okay, we'll get back to the Apollo Theater in just a few minutes, but let's take the Wayback Machine.
Yes.
And tell us, what was it like for you as a high school student?
Right. Well, I was born and raised in the wonderful city of Mount Vernon, New York. Shout out to Mount Vernon. And I'm one of 14 children that my mom eventually had. Imagine 14 children. We were very, very, very poor. In 1958, unfortunately, we were evicted from our home in Mount Vernon, and some of us were placed in the foster care. Some were eventually adopted. My dad took some of my siblings with him. My mom had a couple with her, and we were all separated. And that was in 1958. In 1962, me and my two brothers, who they kept together, we were reunited with my mom. And we went back to Mount Vernon only to have to leave in 1964. and we moved to the South Bronx. And while living in the South Bronx, we were still going through hardships, and it was one day in 1965 when my mom asked me to go down to Harlem to borrow some money from her cousin, because my mother was born in the original Harlem hospital. That's
Oh,
why I have so much love for Harlem. My mother was born, she's a Harlemite. So I went to borrow the money from her cousin, who just happened to live directly across the street from the backstage door of the Apollo. Right now, it's a schoolyard. But back in the 60s, there was a row of buildings there, as well as a hotel. And my mom's cousin was there. I don't know if she lived there or was visiting. So I went there to get the money, and she wasn't there at the time I went to get the money. So I waited for her by walking up and down 126th Street. And I eventually stopped in front of the backstage door of the Apollo Theater. And Frank Schiffman, who happened to be in the building that time, he was the owner. And he comes out and says, "What are you doing back here?" I said, "I'm just waiting for my mom's cousin." And he says, "While you're waiting, we have some people inside rehearsing for a show, and they need somebody to go get their coffee and their shoes shine, their newspapers. And if you do that, they'll give you a tip." And that was in 1965. That was the first time I was ever inside the building, the Apollo Theater. And Frank Shipman allowed me to come back, after school on the weekends. And that's how I initially started the Apollo Theater.
incredible. What a stroke of luck or blessing.
Yes,
Uh,
yes, yeah.
so, all right. So now you started working at the Apollo, going as an errand boy to get coffee and donuts and so forth, whatever. Who are some of the stars that you did this for?
I used to run errands for BB King and his band, our Mom's Mabley, James Brown, some of the Motown acts, Flip Wilson, all the acts that performed at the Apollo Theater back then. When I needed some cash, I would just leave the Bronx and come down to the Apollo Theater and just, I wasn't on their payroll, but Mr. Shipman knew I was going to be standing back there, and if somebody needed something, I was the guy, the kid, to go run and get it for them. So I became known to a lot of the performers back there, and they really helped me out. Back then I wasn't kept right. My hygiene wasn't together, and I think they felt sorry for me, and so they would really give me nice tips, which I even saved some of that money. I was helping my mother out with it. And I saved some. Whenever I need a new shirt or new pants, I would go around the corner to Layton's and buy the latest shirt or sweater, because everybody.
Oh, I remember. I
Yeah,
remember Layton's. Yes.
yeah. And because I couldn't afford it, and all my friends used to tease me because I had just moved from Mount Vernon, and I wasn't dressing like the guys from the Bronx or Manhattan. So I was teased a lot. So I would save my money up, and I would buy the latest gear, latest sweater, latest pants, latest cap, so I wouldn't be bullied and teased by the clothing that I wore, because my family couldn't afford it.
Back then, you could get a beautiful sweater at Layton's for about $50.
Oh,
I
and
mean,
the best of the best for 50.
oh yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
great material.
Mhm.
Now you were in school, but your grades weren't that great. How significant, how important was James Brown to your education?
Well, when I moved from the Bronx, I was in junior high school. When
Mhm.
I moved from Mount Vernon to the Bronx, I was in junior high school. And being in a new environment and a new kid around, the kids from the Bronx, they didn't see this. They thought I was some down south somewhere, because you say you're from Mount Vernon, people don't know the geography. They think you're from some up on some mount somewhere, and they didn't realize that Mount Vernon is a block away from the North Bronx, right? So, but even though I wasn't dressing like these kids, I was bullied. I was, called stinky boy, because our hygiene wasn't kept up, just the way our family was back then, unfortunately. But anyway, I didn't pay attention to school because I was being bombarded with all these, bullying antics, and so I wouldn't raise my hand in class when the teacher was teaching things that I didn't understand. And because I didn't raise my hand and ask for help, I couldn't apply the correct answer to the test, and I failed. And around that time, I was running errands at the Apollo Theater, and I remember Mr. Brown, James Brown, was always there. And every time I would see him, he would always ask me, how was I doing in school? And I always told him that I was doing great, because I he was lying, and then I see him again, and he always asked the same question. Hey, Mr. Billy, because he always called me Billy. And that was one thing that freaked me out. Why was this adult call me Mr. Billy? but he called everybody Mr., right?
That's
So he
right.
says, Mr. Billy, how you doing in school? I says, I'm doing great. And apparently, G. Keith, he didn't believe it, so he made me leave the Apollo one day. I'm not lying. He made me leave the Apollo one day, go all the way to the Bronx, get my report card, bring it back, and show it to him to prove that I was doing great. And I wasn't. I was failing mostly all of my subjects. And he was pissed. First of all, he was pissed that I lied to him.
Mm.
Secondly, he was pissed that I was failing. And he says, man, don't come back anymore and run errands until you can prove that your grades had gone up. And when he said that to me, I didn't really understand. I knew he was a performer, but I also thought that he was one of the owners of the place. For that man to tell me I wasn't allowed to come back, he must be somebody with a lot of pull, right? But either way I looked at it, it prompted me to go to school and start, because I need the money so bad. And it was
Mhm.
so desperate. So I went to school, I started asking for help. I started raising my hand in class. I was cognizant of my classmates watching me, and I thought they were going to call me stupid for asking questions. And I found out that they needed the answers themselves. So they started raising their hand. And before you know it, everybody in the classroom was raising their hand, asking questions. And I finally started understanding what the teacher was teaching. And I applied it to my tests. And I went from failing everything to being on the honor roll. And it just so happened I went to high school. Yep. I went on to high school.
Congratulations.
I was doing well in high school. And I remember telling Mr. Brown that I had finally graduated from high school, and he asked me what was I going to do. I told him that I wanted to continue my education because it started feeling good because I'm starting to get good grades and education was important. So he says, "Well, what do you want to do?" I says, "I don't know. I think I want to get into business." So he gave me a graduation gift, and I saved that money. It was a nice piece of money, right? I saved that money along with some tips that I had gotten from Marvin Gaye. And I took the monies and I enrolled in a business school on 23rd in Lexington called the New York Institute of Credit. And I became
Really?
a credit analyst for financial corporations and doing credit collections. And that was all due to the monies that I received from James Brown and Marvin Gaye,
Get
because my
down.
family didn't have it. I just saved that money. I was helping my mother out with this, buying a shirt with this, and stashing some so I can enter this school. And it was thanks to James Brown, I went to school and I got my training in credit and collections management, and I started working in banks and fashion houses in their credit and collections departments.
What a great story. I mean, and it's a great testament to Mr. James Brown.
Absolutely.
I too, if I may share the story, uh, I had partnered with a young man, a comedian named Joe Keys, and we had a script, a movie script that we wanted the actress Beverly Todd to do. I don't know if you remember Beverly
Oh yeah,
Todd.
of
Yeah.
course. Yes.
And so I went to James Brown, and James gave me $13,000. James says, go to my lawyer, have him write you a check for $13,000 as seed money. And so this seed money was to get this show on the road.
Yes.
Unfortunately, my partner and I we broke up, and I gave the money back to James Brown.
Right.
But James was that type of individual who did not mind helping people, and he's I just love him for that. And then later on, years later, he gave me another musical gift. They went into the studio. He and the he and Danny Ray
Yeah.
and the JBs went into the studio, and they recorded a happy birthday tune for me,
Wow.
and it gave that to me as a gift. So that's a great thing that James did for you, because look at you now.
Yeah, yeah. And I speak with his daughter Deanna all the time. We become very close, Deanna, his daughter. And as a matter of fact, they have a school called the James Brown Music Academy.
Oh, really?
And they brought their students up to the Apollo Theater a few years ago for a tour. And I'm taking them around and whatnot. And it just so happened it was on the same night as the amateur night show.
Hmm. Hmm.
So the kids that came from the James Brown Academy, they were musicians, and so they played a little something for me. And I said, "Damn, these kids are really good, though." So I went to the producer of Amateur Night,
Hmm.
Marion Caffey, and I said, "Man, this is James Brown School Band." and he got them a place on that night's amateur night show. And
Fantastic.
yeah, it was like I'm there in the wings with tears going down my. So I'm thinking about James Brown, and now his daughter's bringing kids from his school to the Apollo Theater to perform, and they're performing on amateur night. It's just an incredible time in my life.
I was at the Apollo. Well, I've been there for many times, many years,
Oh yeah.
but I was at the Apollo. I guess it was before COVID. James Brown's daughter was there, and that she was on stage
Mhm.
singing along with, I think it was Nona Hendrix and some other folks. I forget the name of I think it was "Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud" was the
I gave
name
a
of
tribute to James Brown, and
right.
his daughter Deanna came, was on stage with all the guest stars. Christian McKnight was the director for that
Right.
event. It was a wonder, say, because the movie was about to come out with Chadwick Boseman. And so that was a connection to that "Say It Loud," because that was my favorite James Brown song. It was "Say It Loud."
I'm Black and I'm Proud.
It's my favorite James Brown song, man. Telly.
Oh, yes. Well, look, we've got less than a minute before we take a break. And I just want to say that I'm so happy that I'm here with Mr. Apollo, Mr. Billy Mitchell. And ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't been to the Apollo because you're living in another country or another world or on another planet, you've got to check out their digital stage right now. The Apollo Theater has this digital stage where they have performers and various events going on. Make sure you check it out. We'll be right back real soon. This is G. Keith Alexander, and you're in Harlem, America. And this is What's Hot, Harlem, America with G. Keith. We'll be right back. Yes, and I just want to say that if you happen to be a small Black business owner and you want to have a larger footprint and you want to recover or restore your business because of the COVID pandemic, well, we can bring fame, fortune, and followers to your business right here at Harlem America Digital Network. We've got a program, a package for small business owners that will make uh, it'll just explode your brand. So
Mhm.
please check us out on Harlem America Digital Network at harlemamerica.com. Now we're sitting here with Mr. Billy Mitchell, and I like to call him Mr. Apollo, and a lot of his friends call him Mr. Apollo. And we'll talk about his book that's called They Call Him Mr. Apollo in just a brief bit. But right now, Billy, I'm sure you've got some other great stories you can share with us about some of the people that you've had to engage with at the Apollo.
Yeah. Well, I always have this. I think about Jackie Moms Mabley, the comedian. I remember when she used to run errands. I used to run errands for her at the Apollo Theater, and I do remember one time she invited me and these other young kids to go up to her house in White Plains. I think it was White Plains or Greenberg, to clean up her basement or a garage or something like that. And and I remember that so vividly because Moms Mabley was actually the first woman that I saw wearing men's clothes. You're talking about in the 60s. And I shared this with Whoopi Goldberg because Whoopi had done a animated biopic on Moms Mabley. So when they came and interviewed me, I mentioned that to Whoopi and producers. I said, "Yeah, Moms Mabley. I would see her with the house dress on and the cap and the sweater on
Right,
stage.
right, right.
But after the show, she would put on these men's pants and men's shirts. And as a young kid, I didn't understand that, right? I really didn't understand that. So when I shared that with the producer, they did their research and found out that was her lifestyle, but and they used it as well as my testimony in that little animated thing that Whoopi did for Moms Mabley.
Oh,
But
really?
Moms Mabley was, I remember Flip Wilson. I remember running errands for Red Fox. And I remember Red Fox one time. I went to the store for him. I think he told me to go get him some coffee, and I had to get other things. And I think I brought back some tea, and he jumped in my case, man. He said, "You little stupid little Maryland farmer. I told you I wanted some coffee, right?" And I didn't know what he meant by Maryland farmers. So I remember I went and asked my mother, I said, Mom, I didn't know you were farmers from Maryland. She said, what are you talking about? I said, well, Red Fox, I made a mistake and he called me a stupid little Maryland farmer. She says, what? And what he meant by, he called me an MF.
Oh, okay. Maryland farmer.
MF, he said, you stupid little Maryland farmer. I told you I wanted this, and I said, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Fox, but it's moments I look back and I think about those moments. And I recall one time Ray Charles was in the alleyway back in the park, there's the alleyway, and that's where everybody gathered. They would have cookouts back there. They would play cards. They would shoot dice back there. Would drink their wine, do their thing back there. And I remember one time Ray Charles was back there playing cards. I swear to you, he was playing cards. And somebody would, at the time, they would whisper. There was somebody standing there. They would whisper something. And all of a sudden, I hear this commotion, people and cursing and whatnot. And apparently, Ray Charles had made a mark on a card with his nail to identify the card. And he was cheating and people busted him, right? And man, when I heard them yelling and cursing and whatnot, but that's what they do sometimes. When black folks we yell, we curse and get all loud, and sometimes that's just part of our culture. Right. But it frightened the hell out of me, man. And I remember taking off, man. I got the hell up out of there. But I remember that time, Ray Charles was busted for supposedly, allegedly cheating playing cards, man.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so Ray Charles. Now, what about you got a chance to see some of the female acts coming through the Apollo Theater?
Oh yeah.
Who are some of those that you perhaps ran errands for?
Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells. Let's see. The Supremes. Was it? The girl sing maybe. Oh God, I forget her name. She was a dear friend of my sister, Arlene Smith from the Chantels.
Ah, okay.
Maybe if that's Arlene Smith. She was part of my family when I was a little boy, and I remember when I was running errands for her, they didn't become very famous. That was one of their hit songs, and I later on in life directed Arlene in a gospel musical called Say Yes to Jesus. It just evolved, but a lot of females. What was her name? Gloria Lynn. We were friends. As a matter of fact, I spoke at her funeral. Gloria. I wish you bluebirds in the spring.
Yes.
Give your heart a song to sing, but most of all, when snowflakes fall, I wish you love. That's sweet Gloria Lynn. I ran errands for her. So a lot of females. I remember running errands for Celia Cruz. This was her last performance at the Apollo Theater. This was like in the 2000s,
Oh, really?
Yeah, Celia Cruz at her last performance at the Apollo Theater, and she unfortunately transitioned shortly thereafter.
I was blessed to work at the Apollo Theater. My first job at the Apollo Theater started out when Bobby Schiffman hired me to be a host, the MC for the Temptations and Spinners show. Yes. Now this goes back 1973, and right. the Temptations had no hit at the time, but the Spinners had One Night Love Affair, I'll Be Around, Sadie, and all the big hits. Ooh. So I'm on stage, my first time as MC for a week. We did 10 shows, I guess, that week or something like that. And when I bring out the Temptations, the crowd would boo them. They threw fruit, they threw coins, and they would boo the Temptations. And this went on for every single act. And so I was so hurt myself because I love the Temptations. And then I'd bring out the comedian Franklin Ajayi.
Oh, wow.
And they would boo Franklin Ajayi. and throw fruit at him. And I'd have to go backstage and console him. He'd be sitting on the steps. But then when I brought out the spinners and Felipe Win, would be jumping on one leg, the audience loved the spinners.
Yeah.
And all week long, the spinners, they were the headliners. And that was my first experience emceeing shows at the Apollo Theater.
Wow.
So
That's
I don't
incredible because the Temps were always the dynamic group that everybody wanted to see. And at
exactly.
that time, as that you said that you mentioned that you hosted the show, they had no hits out that time apparently.
That was
And
like 1973.
yeah, their hits were later on in the 60s and late 60s. They didn't come back out with hits till later on after that performance. But I can understand how the Spinners got received the love because they were tight, man. I mean, the
They were.
Spinners were, oh my God, they were awesome group. Absolutely.
They were. Now, I don't know how I didn't run into you back in those days because I don't know if you remember a guy named Alton Collier who used to sell 8 by 10 glossy photos in
In
front of the
front of your
Apollo
pop,
Theater.
front of your
That's right.
pop. Yes,
That's
yes,
right.
yes.
Well, he recruited me to be his assistant. And so we would sell those pictures out in front of the Apollo Theater when the acts were there. And
Yeah.
then Honey Coles and David, who was the manager, assistant manager, would come out and chase us away. And we'd run around back and we'd catch the audience coming out the back doors. And
Yeah,
when James Brown or the Temptations were in town, we'd make like $700 cash.
I
This,
know.
it was an amazing thing. So I left that position when I got hired at WBLS, when Frankie hired me at WBLS. And it was like maybe 6 months later was when Bobby Schiffman called me. I didn't even know Bobby Schiffman. He called me at WBLS and asked me to be the MC at the Apollo Theater. And I was just a little Rudy Poot. I didn't know anything, but you know what? He paid me $800. And now in 1973, I'm in my 20s and someone gives you $800.
A lot of money. Absolutely. It's a lot of money today, but but imagine 73. I mean, the kind of money that was.
Yes.
And it is so interesting that you mentioned that, you don't know how you might have seen me. I wasn't there every day. I was there, when I needed some cash and things
Mhm.
like that. And I was fortunate, to meet all these wonderful people. And you mentioned Honey Coles. Oh my
Yeah.
God. At one time, one of my many positions at the Apollo was I used to manage the gift shop. We opened up in front of the theater was a gift shop,
Mhm.
and I was managing that during the Sutton when Mr. Sutton owned the theater.
Yes.
And I have a photo of me and Honey Coles and one of the sales girls. And now for those who are listening, Honey Cole was part of the dance duo known as the Copacetic, and he became one of the greatest hoofers or tap dancers of his time. Very, very smooth, very, tall, good looking guy. But he also managed and co-managed the Apollo Theater at one time. The great Honey Coles. And that's who, the Hines brothers, aside from their dad, Honey Coles is a big influence in their style of tap dancing, So Honey Coles you mentioned Honey Coles, and it just made my heart flutter, In my book, I have a photo of me, Honey Coles, and the salesperson in the store. Yeah, Honey Coles is
Well,
very great.
well, Honey Coles, his partner during the time that he had his tap dancing act was Charlie
Charlie
Atkins,
Atkins, yep,
and Charlie was the one who groomed all of the Motown acts.
it's true.
He gave them the polish and the moves and all of the things that we've come to know them for. That was Charlie Atkins.
That is so true. I'm glad you let the public know that because, you see the Temptations walk, and all the moves that the Temps, those were all choreographed by Charlie Atkins, and he was part of that duo, the Copacetic with Honey Coles. And Honey Coles, a big time Harlemite. He could walk down 125th Street and, hey, honey, hey, what's up, baby? Hey, Honey Coles, and Charlie Atkins, taught the Supremes, all the Motown acts, from the Miracles, Well, they had to go through this process, artist development, etc., choreography, how to talk in interviews, etc. But when it came down to choreography, Charlie Atkins was the guy from Motown who taught all those acts, those fabulous moves, particularly the temps.
Oh yes, oh yes. So I've spent many years in the Apollo, and I've seen the dressing rooms. I've even gotten dressed in some of the dressing rooms. Uh, some of the dressing rooms now have names on them. In fact, you've got there's a room where downstairs where Flip Wilson
Yeah,
used to get dressed in, and
yeah,
that's downstairs.
yep,
Then there's another room with. Tell us
yeah.
the names
Well,
of the.
well, I named that room the Flip Wilson room.
Oh, really?
That was my idea, yeah, because when I used to run errands, that's where Flip would get dressed so he could quickly get onto the stage rather than coming from the other side where the dress rooms were.
Hmm.
And Flip Wilson, I would, he would send me to the store. I would knock on the door, and he would slip a note underneath the door. He would never open up the door, you know. Yeah, and he would slip a note underneath the door, tell me what he wanted from the store and the money to get it. And I would bring the food back and I would knock on the door, Mr. Wilson, your food is here. All right, thank you. And he would never open the door. And I used to wonder why. And then I remember one day they were doing a sound check and he was up on the stage. And I went downstairs to the green room where the dress room was, and the door was slightly ajar.
Hmm.
And I looked inside and there was a cot, right?
Hmm.
Along with some suits hanging up on one of the pipes.
Hmm.
And there was a sink in there as well. So Flip Wilson had all the accommodations that were better than the dress rooms upstairs, I mean, suits and the clothes and things hanging off the thing. So as time went by, we changed management and I started doing the tours. So I went to management. I told them the story about where Flip Wilson got dressed. So we decided to put a post on the door calling it the Flip Wilson room.
I've
But that
seen
was
that.
also
Yes.
the room that a lot of times Sandman got dressed later on before
Oh.
on amateur night, so we'd have easy access to the stage. So but I named the Flip Wilson room, but that's also where Sandman, and for those you want to know who Sandman Sims was also a great tap dancer, and his position at the Apollo Theater during amateur night was the executioner. Now, the executioner was the guy who went on stage and chased people off the stage when they were booed by the audience. But most people got to know Sandman from the TV show, It's Showtime at the Apollo. However, the original executioner started in 1954 was a guy named Norman Miller, who they called Puerto Rico,
Oh, really?
right? And Puerto Rico was a stagehand at the Apollo back then. And during amateur night, there was a performance on the stage that Puerto Rico didn't like. So he slightly ran on stage and said, "Boo," and the crowd started laughing, right? So this went on for a while. So they decided to keep that in the show and called the character Executioner. When the theater closed in 77 by the Schiffmans and Mr. Sutton reopened in 1985, he wanted to continue that character. So Puerto Rico had retired, so they hired Howard Sandman Sims to be the new executioner to chase people off the stage until he transitioned. Now we have C.P. Lacey.
The great C.P. Lacey.
Great C.P. Lacey.
He's been on our show as well.
C.P. Lacey's the best. He's an impersonator. He does everybody from Barack Obama to Snoop Dogg to James Brown to Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, Michael Jackson. I mean, C.P. Lacey is one of the best impersonators I've ever seen in my life. He does Prince. I mean, and he does them really, really well.
So well that he changes his whole character.
Yes.
He puts on their outfit, their signature outfits, does the makeup, and he looks just like them, and he expresses himself the same exact way.
All the little mannerisms and idiosyncrasies that these acts have, C.P. Lacey nails them. I mean, you know exactly who he's talking about. First is visual. You'll see, because he spends a lot of money on the makeup and the clothing that he wears to do these particular characters. And he's just one of the best and a dear friend, a great actor, great director. He's got his own, podcast as well, the C.P. Lacey Show, and just a very dear friend, a very spiritual guy, used to do, street comedy, along
Hmm.
with all the greats from, Charlie Murphy and all those guys started out there, Union Square, on 59th Street and
Columbus Circle.
Columbus Circle, all those
Yeah.
guys out there, they started all their comedy out there doing street comedy, and a lot of them went on to have extreme success. CP Lacy has his own success in his own right, but he's just one of the best out there and still doing it to this day.
So he certainly is.
Yeah.
So we've got about a minute left, and before we take a break and come back, and I just want to remind people that you can check out What's Hot Harlem America with G. Keith Alexander every Friday at 1 p.m. and you can catch us live on Voice America Variety Channel or HarlemAmerica.com. And we've got all of our podcasts from the months and months from before. All of our podcasts are up there, so you can always go there and check us out, and you can always subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcasts, where you can find Harlem America with G. Keith Alexander. So Billy, when we come back, your book, man, you've got some great stories in your book, and we want to find out how you got the title Mr. Apollo Theater. So we'll do that when we come back. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening. Don't go away.
All right.
Okay, we're here with Mr. Apollo, Billy Mitchell. Billy, for maybe about 8, 9, 10 years, I've been fortunate enough to be the announcer at the Apollo whenever there's a spring gala. And I've had a chance to work with some really great musicians and some great artists. And one of the great musicians coming out of the Apollo Theater is Mr. Ray Chu. Let's give some props to Ray Chu.
Absolutely.
And what's it like? Because you've worked with all these wonderful musicians. What is it like being a part of the Apollo Theater family and knowing that all of this history and the celebrities and big names you've had an opportunity to associate with?
Well, you shout out to Ray Chu. I just spoke with Ray last week. It's funny that you mentioned. I just spoke to Ray last week. Ray Chu is probably premier music director, musician in the world. Ray Chu is very special, very, very a good man. One of the best. You've seen him on all the major TV Dancing with the Stars and American. There was Ray Chu and the crew of the band, as well as being the band for It's Showtime at the Apollo. But I remember Ray back in the 70s. Ray, as a young teenager, was the music director for Ashford and Simpson,
Yes.
as a young man, and so as time went by, you just see him progress and get better and better. But, being around all these musicians, I have a habit or point to when there's a performance, when I'm available, I like to stand in the wings and watch these musicians, over time and just see the musicians do their thing and the energy that they send out to the audience and how the audience receives it. I've been so fortunate and so blessed. I don't know how the creator just put me in the position to see all this stuff. Why me? But I receive it and I'm so grateful. Now, as far as the name Mr. Apollo, I've never called myself that. They call me Mr. Apollo. And it was a name that was given to me by the people of Harlem. Back in the early 2000s, I used to coordinate at the Apollo Theater a movie program for kids called Apollo Movies for Kids. And it was sponsored by Lehman Brothers, the financial corporation, right? And we would invite free of charge kids from NYCHA, kids from shelters, kids from the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, all over to come see a movie free of charge all year long. We reached out to some of the major studios like Viacom and Disney, and they were so gracious to give us the master tapes to show these movies. And we had popcorn and frankfurters for the kids, and it was free. It was free. We did this during the summer, spring, fall, all year long, and we got the latest movies out and shown to the kids before they were actually in the movie theaters around me. And then the Magic Johnson Theater picked up on it and they started
Really?
doing a movie kid. But I would see people in the community as I walked around back then, and the little kids would be with their parents. They hi, Mr. Apollo, and their parents started, hi, Mr. Apollo, and that's where the name came about. And then as time went by, some of the staff started referring to me as Mr. Apollo, and it's just a name that stuck. So that's why when I decided to write my autobiography, and that was because people kept saying, Billy, you need to write your autobiography, tell your story, And I said, I've never written a book. I don't know how to write a book. I don't know the first thing about a book, autobiography or anything. But what I did was, I remember in 2010, the Apollo gets a call from the White House saying that Mrs. Obama, her mother, and her daughters were going to be in New York, and they wanted to come to the Apollo for like a little tour. So the management tapped me to give Mrs. Obama a tour. Nobody in the staff was allowed, Secret Service didn't allow anybody to join, not the president, not nobody except me. So I'm taking Mrs. Obama around and I'm sharing with her, and she was very, very comfortable because the Secret Service guy says, man, she's really feeling good, because I said, well, that's my sister, you can relate, y'all may not understand it, but there's this spiritual connection. I don't care, she has the title of the first lady, but she's a Black woman. She's one of my sisters. So we were singing Temptation songs, me and this and Sasha Malia was doing, I remember they were doing, because we was doing like a little mock amateur night, and Sasha Malia was singing Mary Mary's song, Shackles on My Feet so I can dance. And they were killing it, man. They were like, I said, damn, look at these little girls. But you would think that, well, they wouldn't have the moves, but then also dawned on me, wait a minute, they're Black, so they know how to get down, right? So I was, but Miss Obama made a comment to me after the tour. She said, you need to write your book. You need to write a book about, and I said, wow, she's not the only, I've heard other people say, and that gave me that seed that I needed to consider it. So I went to my dear friend Herb Boyd, right? The legendary
Amsterdam News.
Herb Boyd, Amsterdam News, all that. And I said, Herb, I want to write the book. He says, man, just sit down and start writing, because I was going to record it, but the tapes kept messing up. So I just started writing, and I went back to him and I said, Herb, can you transcribe what I wrote and let it make sense, to people? Because I'm all over the place. Different things happen at different times. So Herb says, okay, just submit it to me and I'll sit down and work on it. And then we decided to reach out to Darlene Gist, G-I-S-T, Darlene Gist, and she edited the book for me, and we worked on the cover, and we wanted to not have the Apollo logo in it for various reasons, but we wanted to know people were talking about 125th Street, so we had 125th Street and yada, 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 and we created the cover for the book. And that's I'm working on my second book right now, because a lot has happened since that book came out in my life and at the Apollo Theater. Things that I now want to share. The first book was about how I started and my journey to up until 2010. This book is about other things that happened, things that I want to share. Some are good memories, some are bad, but that's just, how we all evolve. We go through these ups and downs. We go to these dark places. We go to these bright places. We send out good energy. We receive good energy, and how it affected me where I am to this day, how I've grown, and from things that I've done in the past and things that I look forward to doing, so the second book is going to drop some bombs that people, oh, yeah, I got it. Well, the truth is the truth, I always try to tell the truth as far as I know. I don't speak on something that I have no knowledge of. Because you're just spreading rumors, you're just spreading folklore, and that's the problem with a lot of things that were said or are being said about the Apollo Theater. There's a lot of rumors, there's a lot of his story, rather than the truth. So rather than go by his story, I created the tour to tell my experience and some of the truths that I can prove. So there's it's always interesting to talk about the Apollo, and you hear people say things on the street about things that they think happened at the Apollo, but they don't really know what they're talking about. I found that out a lot over the years. But you can't argue with people. I let people be who they are, where they are, but I know the truth about a lot of stuff, you know. So, you know, there's always folklores and rumors about the Apollo, man. You're gonna hear that even about us as a people. You know, people don't know the truth. Sometimes we don't know the truth about who we really are, you know.
Well, let me ask you this then.
Mhm.
Is it a rumor
Mhm.
or the truth
Right.
that if you close the doors, lock down the Apollo Theater, and
Mhm.
at night, some people have seen or they've seen the images of or say they've heard uh, the spirits of past performers. Is that true, or
Well,
is it a rumor?
let me tell you, in my personal experience, there are spirits in the Apollo Theater, without a doubt. There, I've never seen a ghost. See, ghosts, they're visual stuff
Mm-hmm.
that you see.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen a ghost, but I'm telling you, my God knows I'm telling the truth. When you walk in that theater, you feel the spirit. And when I walk in that theater, there's times I walked into the main auditorium. You know, the lights were out. There's nobody in there except the ghost light that we leave on stage at all times.
It's called a ghost light.
So it's called a ghost light, so that when the spirits or ghosts are walking around, they don't trip over falling. All theaters have a ghost light, even on Broadway. There's a one light, yeah. But I'm telling you, you feel this energy. You know, you feel this energy. Before I start my tours, right? I never let anyone sit in the front two rows, because when I'm doing the tours, we start out in the auditorium and people are seated, you know, and I never let anybody sit in the front two rows, because I tell people that's where the ancestors, that's where Marvin Gaye is sitting, that's where Michael Jackson, that's where James Brown, Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday, they're Split Wills, they're all sitting. So I never let anybody sit in the front. And people just think this dude is weird. What is he? You know, they still, why can't we sit in the front row? No, that's where the ancestors. And I feed off that energy, and I ask them for permission to tell their story. I always ask for the permission. That goes back to our in our culture in the village of Africa.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Ask the elders for permission to speak. You just don't, you know, talk your stuff. You know, you better shut up. You know. So I ask their permission to speak and share their stories, and I feel their spirit. Even though you hear these sounds, because the building is old, you walk in there. Even when you're walking up the aisles, you're gonna hear little, you know, the floors moving and sounds and things happening over there. To the average person, it'll scare you to death, and you want to run out the theater, right? But to somebody who knows what it is, I'm not afraid. Now, on the other hand, if I did see a ghost in that building,
Uh-huh.
I would run through one of those damn walls and get the hell up out of there quickly. And you can say, Jackie Robinson, you let me see a ghost up in there, I'm going, bro. I'm going.
I don't blame you. Me too.
I'm
Hey,
out of there.
look, because we're running out of time, but I did want to say that you're the host of Signature Saturdays.
Yeah.
For the Apollo Signature Saturdays, and I have had the opportunity of writing my signature on the wall. However, the white ink ran out before I could finish my name, so I never got a chance to complete my name. But tell the audience of what you're doing with Signature Saturdays.
Right. And Signature Saturdays, shout out to Fatima Jones, who is the director of marketing and communications, and Miss Kirsten Stevens, who is our digital director for marketing. That was their idea, that, you know, because, you know, during the tours that I do, we talk about the signatures. See, backstage, stage drive the Apollo Theater, back in the 1980s, the stage crew decided to have performers, after they did their set, to come and sign their names on the wall. And this went on for a while. And sometimes we had shows where we would see celebrities in the audience, and we would invite them to come up and sign their names up on the wall. So the people in our marketing, Fatima and Kirsten, they came up with this idea to do this Signature Saturday. They started doing Black History Month, where I would talk about each of the signatures and the backstory behind it and who signed it and how this all came about. So that was our signature Saturdays that we started, thanks to our Marcom department, the incredible Fatima Jones and Kirsten Stevens. And that was their idea, and they tapped me to host it.
That's fantastic. Now we might as well give shout outs to Janelle Procope
Oh, yeah.
and to Camilla Forbes
Absolutely.
for their wonderful job there at the Apollo Theater. We've got about 2 minutes left.
Yes.
Tell people, give them one hook in your book so they can go out and buy They Call Me Mr. Apollo.
Right. You can purchase a copy of the book, and I urge you to do that because some of the proceeds from the book, I sponsor a basketball team in Harlem called Playing on the Edge basketball. I've been doing that for about 9 years, and they were having some financial issues. So I decided to donate some of the proceeds from my books to this organization. But you can purchase the book by going to Blurb, BLURB.com. Blurb.com. The book is called They Call Me Mr. Apollo. It is a quick read. I want people to know it's a quick read. It's not a whole thick, thing, but it's my first book. And I would appreciate it. It has some images of me and some of my friends that I came up with that are now major stars. Because I'm from Mount Vernon, New York.
Denzel Washington is one of them.
That's one of my boys. We grew up together as kids together, and the first movie that I ever did, in which I actually spoke, because like yourself, I'm an actor, but the first movie that we ever did, I was in a scene with Denzel in the movie Malcolm X, speaking,
All right.
and then that just opened up the door for other things, but that's one of my guys. I've known him since he was about maybe 7, 8 years old. Yeah.
Well, we've got 1 minute, but this has been really a great conversation.
Yes,
you are a wonderful asset for the Apollo Theater, and I certainly hope that they're grooming someone to replace you if something ever happens to you, because who else has these stories? I mean, to tell but you. But thank you so much, Billy Mitchell, for coming to What's Hot Harlem America with G. Keith Alexander. And thank you to the Apollo Theater for all the love they've given me over the years. And ladies and gentlemen, continue to go to the apollotheater.org for their schedule, calendars, events, and even to make a donation to help them during the COVID pandemic. So thank you so very much. Have a great day and a better one tomorrow. Don't judge your brother or sister too harshly until you walked a mile in his or her shoes. And remember, life is tough, but you're tougher. I'm G. Keith Alexander. See you next week.